Hi everyone out there in Let's Stay at Home land. So today we're going to have a little bit of a look at how we can create something using Keynote. So over the last couple of weeks, we were looking at different tools and bits and pieces, and we want to sort of find ways that we can tie it all together. And this is a really good starting point. So while we're not going to go into a huge amount of depth just yet, what we will do is we'll just start having a bit of a play with a different app that will allow us to sort of bring some of those bits and pieces together. Anyway, you don't want to hear me waffling on a heap, so let's sort of dive right into it. To show you what we're aiming for, I'm just going to tap on Keynote and open up an infographic that I've made. So I called it 1 week of waste. And let's just assume for a moment that a school has done a bit of an analysis of their waste, rubbish, kids throwing out all bits and pieces during the week. And we've broken it into food scraps, paper, soft plastics, and hard plastics. And so we thought, okay, well, let's go by weight. So what we did, just to get an idea, and I've made all these numbers up, I've just used a quick spreadsheet, broken it all up, shaped or hard plastics, soft plastics, paper, and food scraps. And just a quick bit of maths in here, so it's a really nice way of tying in some maths as well over the 5 days of the week. Given it a total, let's assume that it's all by weight, and then a percentage of the weight of those bits of waste. Like I said, I've just totally made up all these numbers. So, and I'll have these files available too, so that you can just sort of, you can use them, or you can freeze the video here and have a look in, or make your own up, whatever works. So, talking about making an infographic, infographics, they're really easily made in here. They're nice. They can be a bit fiddly at times because you're trying to be a precise designer on an iPad, which is okay. It's just that it can sometimes get a little bit fiddly. So I'll sort of put a little asterisk here in saying, you're going to see me make mistakes. I'll hit that undo button plenty of times. Things I'll tap when I don't mean to, and and that's just the way it is. So if I was to jump into Safari and have a quick little look at Infographic, just a basic image search of Infographic, you can see some pretty cool designs in here. And I'm not suggesting that we just sort of go and rip one off, but you might see an aspect of a design. Like, let's take this one, for example. Like, I really like how they're different tabs, but the shadow sort of blends from one to the next. Looks like they're staggered. And it looks nice. I like that. And so I might say, well, I'm not going to rip that off entirely, but I like the concept, so I might borrow it. A bit of creative license there and in using it. So it is a really nice starting point, is to just see different features of different infographics, because there are a stack of them out there, and just sort of suggesting, okay, here's some really cool ideas. I'm not saying rip them off, but you might borrow some concepts or some design features, which I think's great. So, like I said, let's have a bit of a look back at one I've made. Now, this isn't overly exciting. Like I said, I'm just trying to keep it simple just to get us started. So, again, I've taken that information of maths and put it into here. So what have I got in front of me here? I've got a few bits and pieces and things that you might recognize straight away, and some things that might be new. First of all, I've got a border around it. We had to play with using shapes, and we had to make a border, so we can identify that one. My heading, which says 1 week of waste, is actually made up of, now I've grouped it here, so I'll just ungroup it. You can see there it's actually made up of three different text objects. So I know I could have probably tried to type it all into one text box, but it can get a little bit tricky and a bit frustrating trying to maneuver everything everywhere. So by keeping everything separate just means that I've got a little bit more control over it. That's all. So 3 different text boxes, and I'll just regroup them. Moving underneath, you can see that there are 4 distinct looking things, or sort of very similar in a way. We've got an image. We're moving from right to left to right to left. We've got an image for each one, a color scheme. So you'll see that repetition that I talked about before. I've got a particular color scheme, and I'm using the text in that color and then inverting it for the percentage on a large box. And you'll see it replicates underneath. Paper was an interesting one because how do you show a sheet of paper or scrumpled up paper? So anyway, paper plane and a printer might do the job. Soft plastic, once again, there's really not going to be an object for glad wrap. So, a balloon, I suppose, it's plastic. I suppose it's a bit more rubber, but anyway, gives us an idea. And hard plastic, hey, we could just assume it's a plastic knife and fork. So either which way, and like I said, that's just what I'm using here. You could do something totally different. All right, so how do we make it? So for the purposes of you not having to sit here and watch me fiddle around with every little bits and pieces, I'm going to show you a little part and then I'll just speed it up to get to the next bit because you just don't need to sit here watching me manipulate all the little objects. From your end, you just hit pause and go from there and have a play and put it together. Again, just before I get started, the whole idea is that it's a bit flipped. So you would have a play with this at home, and then we can have a chat about it using a collaboration tool on Flow. So anyway, let's get into it. So I'm going to start, as I've said to you before, I always sort of get everyone at this point where it's just get to the templates. Like I said, with all the classes, it's just get to the templates. I know everyone's at the same point, and then away we go. For this, I'm going to just start with a normal standard white one. Now, I ordinarily say standard or wide, and always wide. Definitely wide. If it's always presenting, it's always wide. If you're putting this up on a screen and you're presenting to a group of people, always wide. But it actually doesn't really matter for this. So it's standard. I'll go white and grab it. Okay. So you'll notice that mine was quite tall and thin. So let's make some changes here. The 3-dot menu in the top right-hand corner. So circle with 3 dots, up into there and down to document setup. So in here, I've got 2 options across the bottom. My themes, which I don't really want to look at my themes right now because I'm not really interested in them, but my slide size is. And here is where I can chop and change how it's going to look in terms of its proportions. So I don't want any of those preset options. I do want a custom one. And mine, for just numbers sake, I made it so 1,000 points high and 1,000 points wide and 2,000 points high. Very, very annoying when you get a phone call right in the middle of this. So anyway, makes a bit of a problem. Anyway, here we go. Let's keep going. Done. And you'll see that we've got something that looks a little bit more the shape that I had before. I'll hit done in the top right corner. Now I can use these text boxes, or if you just feel more comfortable, you might say, okay, so I have got my my page. It's set up. First thing I want to do, hit the top, rename it because presentation 9 is not okay. So I'll call it something like waste infographic. And I'll go done. Oh, of course, because I've already made one. I'll call it number 2 and done. All right, and there it is there. So I've got my waste infographic blank, and I'm ready to add some bits and pieces to it. So that title that I showed you before, which if I just jump back and bring it in, it looked a little like that with... Oh, by the way, I'll just call this out. This is one thing I really do actually find a little bit frustrating, which, if you do zoom in, you'd think it'd be nice that I could just clearly get to the top, but not so easily. So when I said before, it sort of has some of these frustrating pieces to it. There we go. There's another one. Is that it doesn't quite allow me to get to the top. Something, again, I'll add that to some feedback to Apple. Any which way, let's keep going. So I have my infographic template here. I'm going to add some text. If you remember, text is the very, very first object. And I'm going to simply type 1. And now I'm going to keep some consistency here. So my font choice for this is going to be Futura. I know I'm zipping through those menus. Hopefully by now you'll know where to find fonts. But I'm going to go to Futura. That's going to be my consistent font for all of them. Now we'll go from here. We'll zip through it and I'll just make it. Okay, so I've put my text in, and you would have noticed that my word waste is a little bit higher. Sorry, word waste is a little bit bigger. I've used a larger font for that, and that's just my choice. Depending on how you want these to sit, you can sort of play around with it. I'm trying to align the text top and bottom to the one. It might suit you nicer. It might, I don't know. Again, it's entirely up to your aesthetic eye. But of course, I'm not really keen on the text color there, so I'll just, I don't know, let's just pick a couple of different colors here. So we might just choose, oh no, that's clashing, so something different there. I do want waist to be maybe green, something like that. Not really happy with that blue. We might even go, look, you know what? Like I said, picking fonts, picking music, you can be here forever. Okay, so I've got my 1 week of waste sitting there. That's my heading. Now, for what it's worth, I'm going to tap. I'm going to group them. So tap. No, here we go. Tap. Got to get yourself on the actual thing there. Tap, and group them. So now I've got one object. And again, that's up to you. Are you going to put it in the middle? Are you going to put it to the left, to the right? Entirely up to you. So my next step is I want to add a border. So I'm going to just put that in there. Now this is something that we did do in the lessons as well. So remember that Pages, when we used Pages, doesn't have such a thing as border art, but we do just use shapes to make borders. So I love my rounded rectangles, so I'm going to just tighten up that little rounded corner there into style. Turn on the border. If you remember from the workshops, I said about turning on the border first, because if you get rid of the fill first, it means you've actually got nothing there to see, and it's there. There could be a border there, but you can't see it. So either which way, border on first. I'll jump over into my fill and just slide across because I'll see no fill there. Grab that, back out of there and into my border. This is where I can sort of pick and choose. I'll have the chalk effect. I'll probably go for that sort of green again, and definitely need to bump it up just a little bit. So something like that. That's my starting point. I'm going to move, no good. Now what I am going to do, actually that's a good point, I am going to lock things down soon enough. Right now, you'll notice that I can't tap. I'm tapping here, and you can't see that, but I'm tapping, I'm trying to get hold of that heading. And as you know, like layers of a cake, this border is actually sitting above that text. So I'm going to need to tap on arrange, and I've got my slider here at the top and slide that to the back. So now I have it. I'll put it in the middle because that's the right place for it to go. But I can tap my heading and I'll move that to the side. Now I might suggest you can lock this border. It's not quite in the middle. You can lock this border right now if you wish. There it is. Having the border selected, I'm going to format, and down the bottom is lock. All those little blue dots around the outside go grey with X's. The reason why I'm not going to do that yet is because there's a good chance I'm going to need to move it and bring it forwards and backwards. And so either or, I'm going to unlock it. But if you find that it helps you to lock things, then hey, go for it. Again, whatever works for you. All right, so going from my information, let me just zip back to my document here. I know that my shaped plastics is 2.6% of my waste. So I'll bring this around the other way. So my shaped plastics were 2.6. Just got to remember that number, 2.6. So here we go. We'll start from this side. Of course, it doesn't really matter what side we start this from. Bring that down a little bit. Now I know that the edge of this rectangle is sitting over the top of the border, and we'll come back and fix that later. We want the border to sit above it or everything to sit behind it. Doesn't want to quite be exact. That's okay there. So 2.6%. I'll just double tap on that box and I'll say 2.6%. Oh, that's definitely not a 6. 2.6%. into the format and text, remembering that I'm keeping my font consistent. So Futura was my font. Bump it up nice and big. Might even bold it as well, just to make it really big. Okay, get that font nice and high. I'm just going to make one of these for now and then move it to the left. So that looks okay. The color though, I'm not a big fan of this sort of default blue. So my fill, I'll go for that sort of deep greeny turquoisey color and add some text. And we said this was hard plastic. Good. Pretty sure it was. I'll just double check. Shaped plastics, hard plastics. Yeah. Format, text. I want my color to match. I'll just swish back. So I'm in my color and it was this one just here. Again, you might play around with it and say, do we want it bold or not bold? So I'm going to leave it bold. I definitely want it a little bit smaller. I don't want it that big. And my font, again, Futura. It's very easy to forget fonts. Now, again, you might think about how you're going to position this. So I'm going to just place mine right there. Bring that across a little bit. Okay, so that's pretty good. And then I just needed a few shapes for hard plastic. And if you recall from my previous one, I used a knife and fork, which is in the objects category. If I scroll down, there's my knife. And if I scroll down a bit more, there's my fork. Make them a little bit bigger. It's actually really easy to manipulate things when they're a lot bigger. So you might say, well, if I want to twist this around, I've got two fingers on my iPad right now and I can twist it. It's definitely a whole lot easier to do it a lot bigger and zoomed in. So I'll jump in here, my style. Look, I might have a pink knife and fork because I can. And I'm going to bring them across. I'm going to twist the fork that way. I might twist the knife that way. And now that I'm sort of happy with the way that they are, I'm going to make them a lot smaller. Okay. So there's the start of my my sections of my infographic. So the idea here is that I'm going to replicate this 3 more times, one for soft plastic, one for paper, and one for food scraps, using the information. So again, I'll zip through this, speed it up so you don't have to sit there watching me do it. I'm pretty confident you'll see me hit the undo button a few times, so that's just the way it is. Yeah, here we go. So head down and into it. Okay, I'm just going to slow down here because the plane, being that it's made of paper, is white. So I can't have white on white. So I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm actually going to give it a black border and fill it with the lightest shade of white before white. So I'm going to grab that one there. So it's the first shade of grey. And then sort of, at least it looks light in colour, but it is not white. Okay, so I've put everything together now. So I've got something that looks a little bit like an infographic. The only thing now is that my data is clearly incorrect. Hard plastics was 2.6. I'll jump back over to my numbers doc. 1.8 was my soft plastics, 1.8. This is where I could, if I wanted to be a little bit sneaky, I can grab my data and just put it here. Don't worry if that looked to spin you out by just putting that there, but either which way, I know I can do it. 25.1 is my paper, 25.8 70.1, and my food scraps was 70.6%. And now I can sort of